All right, guys. So now let's jump back into MQL5. We got a very, very important week next week. So it's going to be a good time to kind of play with gold as well as US 30. And as such, got to get this MQL5 script thing done. So let's kind of look at some of the basics. So MQL5, if you didn't know already, is based heavily upon C++. And as such, it is its own programming language, and it's very similar to almost all programming languages like Python. But just like most programming languages, you need to stick with understanding the basic data types in order to utilize it. So it's important that I create this video so you guys can understand how some of these basic data types will work, just so you can play with this to a higher degree. In order to write these scripts, you need to know the data types. In order to learn the data types, I'm going to show you right now so that you can build better trading algorithms for MetaTrader. All right. So as you can see here, I've created some comments. So, and if you want to know how to create a comment, literally just 2 double backslashes, and then you just put what the comment name is. So you can see what the basic data types we're gonna kind of go through today. First one is good old variables. So they're literally the same as with every programming language. So if you've seen me use variables in Python, it's literally the same thing, except it's a little bit more structured here where you have to tell meta editor what type of variable it is. So in this case, let me create one right now, create an int. I'm going to name this variable A, and it's going to equal 10. What am I saying right here? So for every variable type, again, like with most variables that we create, this variable is called A. We need to tell meta editor what type of variable it is. In this case, it's an int or an integer. Now, if you don't know what an integer is from algebra class, let me explain. Integers are whole numbers. So it's the same thing like with Python. Anytime in Python we are using whole numbers, we have to declare it within an integer. But in Python, we don't ever have to use the term int. But in MQL5 and C++, we have to tell it what type of data type it is, which is an integer. Now, again, integers are whole numbers. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, go up to 1,000,000, and even negative. All right. Integers do not have decimal places with other values in it. So 0.19, this is not an integer anymore. This is what we would call a float or a float value. Now in Python, I show you that as well too. And ironically, that's going to be the next one that we're going to be dealing with now. To call a float value, you use the term double, B, and this is where we can then use a float value, which has a decimal place at the end. All right. As you see, at the end of every sentence, we put semicolon. That's how you end scripts or end lines within MQL5 or C++. Now, there is many different ways you can call a float value. Double is just the one that you're going to probably use the most. So that's why I just stick to using double. This is how you would tell MQL5 what type of data is going to be stored in this variable, and it's a float. Just like how we told MQL5 is going to be an integer into this variable, and it's going to hold 10, which is a whole number. So again, float values have a decimal point and extra numbers at the end. Integers just have whole numbers, all right? Now, say you want to create a variable with words, like you've seen me create variables before. So let's call this C. Just like with Python, we have to put it within quotation marks. This is how we hold strings. All right, and put, hi guys. That's a simple string. This is how we would create it in Python. However, just like I explained before, you have to tell MQL5 what type of data is being held in here, and that's where you would put string. So you see, we're saying this variable is going to be a string. It's going to hold a string value, which again, a string is held within quotation marks, and it's typically words. All right, let's move that up. And I didn't end it with a semicolon. There we go. Boom. Other things you can hold as well are Boolean values. So Boolean values simply equal true or false. So let's put this as true. And that's considered a Boolean value, but we have to basically state that it's a Boolean value. See? And it's already highlighted for us. Same thing, we can change this to false. Same thing. All right. These are the variable types. So it's very similar to Python. The only difference is that you have to state what type of data is going to be held within that variable. So if it's a string, words, you have to put string. If it's a float value with a decimal point at the end, you have to put double. If it's a whole number, you can put as integer. And if it's a Boolean value, which are true and false values only, you can only put true and false in a Boolean value, you have to put bool. All right. And if you want to print the values, we use print, but we use a capital P. And you would basically just print the value for A. That's it. All right. Now, let's get into the next one, which is just a good old simple function. So let's create a function. So we're going to put int. And again, we have to tell what data is going to be held here. We're going to call an integer that's called add. And it's going to take in two variables, both of integer values. Sorry, it could be int x and int y. Sorry. And in brackets, all right, we're going to create the function to add these two together. So the int of sum, and that's going to equal x plus y. Oh, sorry, x plus y. And we're going to close that off. Apologies, pressing the wrong keys today. Jesus Christ. All right. And then we're going to return, just like we would in Python, return the value with the value that we set within the function. So in Python, to do something similar, we would do definition add, and then we would do x, y. I'm going to show you comparison because I'm pretty sure most of you guys come from Python, similar to I do. Sum equals x plus y, return sum. These two are doing the exact same thing. As you can see in Python, it's a little bit cleaner and it's something that we're more used to, but this is literally the same thing. The only thing that's different is that we have to, again, C++ and MQL5, you have to tell what type of data you want to return. We want to keep it within the integer values. So it's going to return an integer value for this function, which takes in integer values, which is going to be x and y. And even the sum, that's going to be the addition of the two integer values is going to also be an integer. So we're basically just specifying the data types that we're going to be utilizing and returning. So it's not like this where we don't have to put integer in, but it's basically the same thing. All right. So just notice that for when it comes to MQL5 and C++, it's kind of just really about just specifying what type of data type you're going to return. All right. And you could even put this within another variable, which we're going to call results. And it's going to be just add. And now an add is just calling the function above. And now we could put the two values for x and y in that we would like to add together, which is 5 and 7. Boom. See? And the great thing about MetaEditor, just like almost any good IDE, I don't know if you saw that. Let me see if I can pull it. See, it's telling you based on this function what we're returning. So 5 is taking the place of integer x, and now it's asking for integer y, which is getting 7. So we just put that within another variable. So like I said, this is just like Python. So in the previous example, we would just do this in Python. because this is MQL5, C++, we have to specify what the actual data type we're going to be holding it within for this variable, which is an integer. All right, cool. Now let's get down to some math. So now that you understand that, which is good, it's good that you understand math, so you can understand the basic utilization of math in here. So let's do int A equals 1, int B equals 2. Now let's do some basic math. So we say int C equals A plus B. Simple. Int C, which is another variable of the integer type, is just adding these two other variables together. Very simple. All right. Same thing with if you wanted to multiply. Int D would equal A times B. Close. Same thing if we wanted to divide it as well. Now, the thing about dividing, we would have to use a double. Why? Because most times when you divide, there's always going to be a remainder, and a remainder always leads to a decimal point being utilized, right? So that's why we would have to actually use a float value to divide, just in case there is a remaining value. So like if it was 5 and 7, say, again, 5 and 7 will leave a remainder. So 5 divided by 7 is going to leave a remainder somewhere. So because of that, we would have to use a float value for this. It's basic arithmetic. You understand that if there is going to be a decimal point utilized at any portion of any of the numbers that you use, always use a float value data type, which is double. If it's going to remain a whole number, like if you multiply numbers or add them or even subtract them, always use. So I didn't actually add subtraction, but same thing, same rules apply for subtraction. All right. Now let's get to comparison operators. So think of comparison operators as just if-else statements. That's what keep it simple. So if A is greater than B, A is greater than B. Now we want to tell it what we want to do. So say we created an integer. So let's say int A, a second, this is unnecessary space, equals 10, int B equals 1. Okay. If A is greater than B, then we would want something to happen. If this comparison operator is true, if A is equal to B is greater than B, which again it is because 10 is greater than 1, then we want it to do something. So this is where we would print, A is greater than B. So we're just literally printing A is greater than B. Now remember, printing in MQL5 and C++ is capital P. Something that's been kicking my ass, I'll be honest with you, because I'm so used to lowercase p with Python. All right, and now else. Else is basically saying if this actually isn't true. So if else statements are basically trying to figure out if the value that you specify in here is true or false. If it's true, then the first statement will run. So A is greater than B. If it's not true, like say we change this to 1 and change this to 10, then else is going to activate, and that's going to state something else. So in this case, we're going to print B is greater than A. You get it? If this statement is true, if A is greater than B, then this will run. Else, if this statement is false, then this will run. In this case, this statement is actually false. A is not greater than B, so this will run. But in the reverse, when I put 10 was here and 1 was here, this statement will then be true, so then this will run, and this will not run. Simple logic. Now let's get into some logical operators. All right, let's make sure that still recording. Yep, still recording. perfect. Just want to make sure it's still recording. So this is where we're going to take comparison operators to a new level. So if A is greater than 0 and if B is greater than 0. So let's just copy these above here. Let's copy these two variables above here and just use it in the same thing. We didn't actually have to copy it, it still take it from there, but just for understanding purposes. And I actually forgot to put this at the end there. All right. So now this is doing two different conditions. So both conditions need to be true in order for this first line of code to run. So that's, we're going to put print both A and B are greater than 0. But let's say we want to check multiple conditions, all right? Instead of just putting else, we would use else if. Now, again, if you ever use Python, instead of putting else if, we put elif in Python. So this is literally the same thing. This is how we use comparison operators in every programming language, all right? But now we need to state another condition here, just like with elif in Python. And we're going to put, let's see, A is greater than 0, 0, or, and that's what this is. This means or if B is greater than 0. We're going to test this connection. So print, no, we're going to put at least one of them is greater than 0. So this means or, all right? So in Python, we would just simply put or, but in MQL5 and C++, we use these double lines here. And that just basically means or. So that's why I put print at least one of them is greater than 0. Which one? You don't care about. Now, last condition is else, just like up above. So if neither one of these two conditions are true, then else would print. And this is where we would print neither greater than 0. I think I literally spelled greater wrong. Get it? So we check both conditions. So if A is greater than 0 and B is greater than 0, then this will print. Else if A is greater than 0 or B is greater than 0, this will print. But if neither one of these are greater than 0, then the else will run and it's saying neither, are greater than 0. So it's literally the same as above, but just adding more conditions. So you could add as many conditions as you want, but this is a simple way of looking at the conditions. And again, if you come from Python, you come from any programming language, this is the same thing. Ain't nothing changed. This is the same thing, man. All right. Now let's get into arrays. So we talked about NumPy arrays, so you understand how arrays are handled, but now let's explain how it's handled in MQL5 or C++. So this is where we're going to initiate an instance of int or integer, and we're going to name it the array numbers, because there's going to be multiple numbers in this. It's going to hold 5 values, which you have to put in brackets. So you have to state how many numbers are going to be in this array in brackets. It's going to be 5. And now we put the brackets because C++ and MQL5, for some reason, love freaking brackets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is literally how you create an array. You state an integer type, or you state whatever type is going to be. If these had .1 or .2, these will be float values. So instead of int, you would put double for float values. So same logic applies, but this is how you would do it. You would tell what data type it is. You would give the name to the array. You'll say how many digits are, how many numbers are going to be in the array. In this case, it's going to be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you, in brackets, put the numbers that you want to hold in there. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. All right. And indexing it is literally the same thing. If you watch the video on NumPy, it's the same thing here. So we would put print, what do we do? Numbers 0. Now number 0 will fall in the first place. Can you remember in programming, we do not count at 1, we count at 0. So 0 will be the first digit here. Just like, this is exactly like Python, so I don't need to explain this. If you watch the video on NumPy arrays, you already know how to index. So literally, whatever digit you got to find the place within the array. So 0, the second value would be 1. So if I wanted to actually grab 2, I would do index 1. So similar to the way the NumPy arrays work, that's how we index. All right. Really quickly, I actually didn't put it here. So let's create it right now. Let's do a quick for loop based on this. So you can see how for loops are worked. All right. So similar to Python, we put for, and now we need to specify what for. Int I equals 0. I is greater than 5. I plus plus. All right. So exactly. So we're saying we're creating a variable called I, and we're setting it to 0. And then we're saying it's as long as I is less than 5, we want this for loop to run. But at the end of every iteration of this for loop running, we want to add 1. So if you remember in Python, we would actually add at the bottom. So the for loop is supposed to run as long as the condition holds true. In this case, as long as I is less than 5. As long as I is less than 5, this will continue to run. So as you see, I equals 0. And at the end of every loop, it's going to add 1 to it. So then I will equal the second loop, I will equal 1. In the third loop, I will equal 2. Fourth loop, I will equal 3, and so on and so forth until I is greater than 5. That's when the for loop will stop running. That's what this is saying. All right. Just like in Python, we use a for loop whenever we have a tedious task that we have to repeat. We basically just give it a condition for it to stop running. So if we wanted something to run multiple times, then that's what we would do. So in this case, let's just print I. So at every iteration, is just going to print I so you know where it's going to be. So in this case, the first iteration is going to print 0. Second iteration is going to print 1, 2, 3. Again, second iteration is going to print 1, and then third, 3, so on and so forth until it's greater than 5. Once it hits 6, it's not going to print, and this for loop will stop running. So that's exactly what this is saying. It's saying we're starting it at 0, and if the condition holds true that it's less than 5, it's going to keep running, and we're going to add 1 at the end of every loop. So once it is greater than 5, it stops. This for loop stops running. That's what this is saying. All right. I think I just did if else statement. I don't know why I have this here. And now the good old while loop. And these are all the similar to Python, so it's nothing new. It's just, again, the syntax on how you put it together. So if you learn Python, learn JavaScript, wherever language you're coming from, you understand exactly the concept behind all of these basic data types. I just want to show you the syntax of how it's ran in MQL5 or C++. All right, that's just 100% like how you want to do it. All right, so now let's do int I equals, let's give this a value of 1. And just like Python, we call while loops with while. Let's see, while I is greater than or equal to 10. No, keep forgetting. See, again, I'm a Python guy. See, I keep forgetting to end it with a semicolon. I'm going to kill myself over that. Because if you run it, you will run into issues. So we're going to print. I'll spell print wrong. Print the value of I is, and then we put I there, and I plus plus. What are we doing here? You want to know what we're doing here? Exactly what we did in the for loop, except in the for loop, we put a little bit more detail. We actually chunked this all into one line, but the while loop is basically doing the same thing. So actually, let me change this. Let me say if I is greater than 5. So it could be exactly like the for loop. So we're saying that actually, let me change this too, so it could look exactly the same. So we're going to set it to equal to 0, similar like the for loop. And while this is true, similar to the one up here, we're going to print the value of I, just like we did here. And then we're going to add 1 to the value of I, just like we did here. And once this actually is greater than 5, this will stop running, just like up here. That's literally all it is. That is literally every single basic data type of MQL5 or C++, broken down, kept simple. Hopefully you guys learned a lot. We're going to definitely be building on this. I just want you guys to do this because I'm like, if we're going to be learning this new programming language, it will be really bad of me not to show you guys how to utilize the basic data types. Just like with Python and everything else, you need to know the basic data types. They are how you build programs. If you don't know the basic data types, you do not know the language. So it's important that I actually included this. I can't be teaching you this programming language if you don't know the basic data types. So similar for any programming language you want to learn, the first thing you should learn is this. If you do not know the basic data types of any programming language, you are starting off bad. All right. So definitely watch this video a couple of times. Look through the documentation for MQL5 because that team literally creates some amazing documentation on MQL5. Also look into C++ documentation as well because this is literally just C++. So if anything is making you lost about this language, definitely look at the language that it's modeled after, C++, and it will answer all of the questions for you. But that is the basics, data types of MQL5. Hopefully you guys learned a lot. See you guys in the next video. Peace.